Phyllis just asked me if I'm ready to put my coaching hat on for this session because we are going to dive in to I called it a session for this podcast. We're going to dive into a moment that happened yesterday or recently.
Yeah, the day before.
That Phyllis had her mind on one track and Glenn said something and she got knocked off course. They missed each other just barely and what was happening underneath those moments. And so kind of a play-by-play so you can see how this happens so quickly every day in all of our lives and to get curious about yourself. And so welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open the emotions that take you from being disconnected to connected in your relationships and in yourself. I'm your host, Tara Wages, and joining me is marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis Hill. And together, they have founded the Connection Codes, which is the guide to human connection. And we're so glad you're here.
Yes. Hello, world.
Hi, friends. So, we were talking about this before we pushed record. And I think even just hearing you give the introduction, maybe if you've got a camera, and you're really close in, and then every once in a while you do the widescreen and you back up. So, because I think there's times when you go through a season where you're already activated a lot. And y'all may word this differently as far as that goes. I feel like we've been in a season for the last few months that I think of the word weary is a word I think of, but I feel like it's easy for us to miss with each other. So if I was just looking at one incident, and we will share the details of this one incident, but I think when I do the widescreen, and many of you that follow our podcast, you hear what's happening in life, right? And I think, wow, we've had a tough year, like with our daughter-in-law being diagnosed with cancer a year ago and her fight for her life because she was told she had 2 months and to get her life in order, spend time with her family. And, when you're in your 30s, that's not the message you're prepared for. So that was pretty mind-blowing a year ago, and she's still with us. So she has fought hard to live. But then I think about just the season that we've gone through with your mom. And for those who've been keeping up, Glenn's mom did pass on February 12th. So recently. And I just think there are times when you're in a season where there's a lot extra. I would say this has been a year of extra.
We're selling your house.
And we sold everything. We're in a new season of life as far as just living out of a suitcase.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, sold our property, not to downsize, upsize, sideways size, but to be houseless. We're nomads. And because anything can be a stressor, positives are stressors, and still needs to be processed. So anyway, so many things happening for us.
Yeah. And that's when I do the widescreen, because I do think right now, and I know my experience may be different even than yours.
I doubt that. Mine is always exactly identical.
But I just feel like we're missing each other more than we have or do in a normal time frame. And I think that's when I go back to having to do the widescreen and go, there are some really added things in life right now that even with Glenn's mom passing, I think it affected me differently than it affected you. And there's not a right or a wrong, but I think that I just see sometimes when we miss each other, we go over it, we get connected again, but then we like to analyze what happened. And I'm just like, oh man, I'm too tired to analyze what happened. Like I'm too weary. I mark it up as a miss. But then I know that sometimes it feels like, are we on a train that's labeled for the rest of my life now? We're just going to miss a lot. And that feels like a really scary train.
Wow.
And it's almost kind of like, what's happened to us? And that's for me when it's really helpful to do the widescreen and back up and go, well, look at what you've done recently.
Yeah.
Look at what you've been through recently. And I do believe that death, even of an elderly person, sadly, we don't know how to grieve well often. And we have even phrases. You want to like console someone. And so you say things like, well, she lived a good long life. Well, that doesn't console me. Maybe that makes you feel better, but that doesn't console me because for us, it's like, wow, we have no parents left. All 4 are dead. You know, and you just kind of go, it's not like you get a replacement.
Right.
You don't go to Amazon and go, okay, well, I'm going to order a new one. It's over. It's a finality, right? Yeah. And so there's parts of the story that you also just think, oh, I wish we'd have had that last, you know, whatever conversation or hug or, you know, did it end well or did it not end well? And yet it's done. You can't do the redo. You can't go back when someone has passed. Yeah. And so I just feel like I'm in a season right now where I'm pretty like close to tears a lot. And so the misses are more painful. I think sometimes I leave like not feeling totally understood. And at any point you can jump in and kind of share what this season has felt like for you. But I think just the miss we had the other day, which part of why we are sharing it is that I think this happens to humans. Like this happens to couples. This happens to people, are the little misses that at times feel big, really big.
Yeah. And I just wanted to share the macro. I mean, first of all, what you're talking about, that so often, whatever, the cuff of someone's pants is on fire, and then we ask them to hold our coffee for us for just a minute, but they're already dysregulated. It's not that they're burning up, but they're aware that this is a stressor. Something's already happening for them. They're experiencing some pain, the fear, whatever. So then for you to ask them to hold your coffee, which seems like such a little thing, what's the big deal? But there's already stuff happening. But then also the macro, there's a pretty good chance a year from now we won't even remember the miss that we're about to share about. But it's just such a textbook case. You know, we talked about trajectory. It's towards the end of the Connection Codes book. And if you're shooting at a target, you know, the slingshot, a bow and arrow, a gun, whatever, and you barely move, you're going to miss that target by whatever, 10 feet. And if you miss it by 10 feet, it's the same equivalent if you miss by 100 feet. It doesn't matter. If you miss, you miss. It's a miss. Well, that's what happens all the time in people's relationships is the first, whatever, 5 seconds, 8 seconds, 10 seconds, 12 seconds, 15 seconds. They miss that. Then 3 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour later, they're gone. I mean, they've completely missed each other relationally, which, you know, we're just pilgrims on the journey. We're just like everybody else. And if we miss that first few seconds, then we just get knocked off course, which is a perfect example of what we're talking about. Again, it's not because, you know, I don't want our listeners to think, well, that's not even like a big deal. It's not like your house burned down or you're in a car wreck or something. I mean, those things happen and those are horrible and they can certainly be traumatic. But that's not where most of us live. You don't wreck your car every day. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. It's the small misses that wreck us, that really, really harm certainly our relationships, our regulation internally, and therefore you add them up in our lives. So it's not necessarily a big thing, quote unquote big thing, but just adds up, which is exactly what happened for us in that situation.
And I would say for our listeners, they're experiencing that even on a daily basis. Yeah. Like y'all, we definitely have those seasons, the season of loss. I mean, everything that you just described, your daughter-in-law getting cancer, selling your entire property, everything that you've ever owned, and losing the death of a mother, like those three things individually are extremely heavy. Right. Like that's enough. That's plenty. But even for our listeners, there are times where I know for Wes and I, we get to a fight over something so minuscule, like the previously, but it was actually the 25 other things that happened just that day that I stuffed and stuffed and stuffed. So then when my hairdryer is not working before a date night, I'm losing my mind over that. It has nothing to do with the hairdryer. It has to do with everything else that happened. And so as you're listening to what y'all are about to describe, think about that even for yourself of what are these moments that are knocking me off course all day? Oh, this is how it's playing out. This is the result of that. When we have so much in our body.
Yeah, and I just think about the River of Emotion module in the Foundations Masterclass is the three angles of the same idea, let the river flow, live a dam-free life. Because when the river is flowing freely, it's just flowing freely, and it actually brings goodness to life. We're putting our feet in the water, fishing, whatever, and we like it. When the river gets dammed up, now we're in trouble pretty quickly. The 43 feet, once the emotion gets to 43 feet, you're, as we say in the South, a runt, because by then you kind of lost your mind.
Yeah.
So we want to process the emotion at 2 feet. What does that mean? We don't know, but we know it's a lot less than 43 feet. And then the 1 pound weight, we can process a 1 pound weight 500 times. We can't process a 500 pound weight one time, because I can't even lift a 500 pound weight. And if I was ever able to, and I dumped it on you, you're crushed. So now we're both harmed. We're both injured. Whereas if I handed you a 1 pound weight 500 times over a period of a month or two or whatever, you didn't even notice. And then you look over and you're like, shoot, that's 500 pounds of stuff. Yeah, but you didn't notice because we just did it 1 pound at a time. So that's what humans are designed to do. Our babies, they process first time, every time, anytime. We were with Malachi last night. What was the thing? Oh, he wanted to hold my phone. I don't let him mess with my phone. And he does this thing. Oh my gosh, it's so adorable. They call me Papa. But like he'll reach for something that he knows is mine, and he does his little hand like this, because that's what I've done. I'll say, oh, that's Papa's. You can't have that. And so he reached for it. He did his little hand, and he raised his eyebrows like, and he wants it. And I said,
describe that motion for those who are not watching you.
Right. Oh, how do you?
It's kind of like a no, like, but with your hand, like a gentle wave.
Almost like the Queen of England's wave. Yeah. It's so adorable. You just learn to do that. And he reached for it again, and he did the same motion. And I said, yeah, that's Papa's. Well, then he reached for it the third time, and he touched it, and he picked it up, and he handed it to me. And I said, no, you're not allowed to play with that. And he wasn't playing with it. He actually handed it to me, and I set it back down. That little guy, it was a near-death experience for him. He melted down. He didn't cry. He wailed, probably for 20 seconds. And I just oohed him. I said, oh, yeah, I hear you, buddy. That's a lot. It was 20 seconds. And again, you're pretty sure he lost a leg. This is just traumatic. 20 seconds in, and I am convinced that it's because I just oohed him. I'm just present, and Phyllis and Malachi's parents are there, and we're just all oohing him like, oh, yeah, that's a lot. Because it is for him. This is his universe.
Yeah.
All of us adults are sitting there going, this doesn't even matter. It does to him. He wouldn't be crying if it didn't matter to him. And we oohed him, and isn't that fair? 20 seconds?
Yeah.
20 seconds, he's good. It's processed. And then we're back to playing, having fun. If I had resisted his energy, and again, I'm not going to let him play with his cell phone. That's just an absolute. But I'm going to allow him to experience the emotion of it. And that's what we all need. We all need to process that in the moment as it's happening. And then we're good. Whatever, 20 seconds. I'll take 60 seconds. I'll take 2 minutes later. Because most of us have conflicts for hours, days. We specialized in several weeks. And if we could just have safety for a minute, it would process through. So you want to tell the story, or me too, as far as just what happened?
Yeah, I'll tell my version, and then you can tell your version, because it may not be the same version.
Okay.
So I had a busy day. One of the things was a doctor's appointment, and
a new doctor.
Yeah, saw a new doctor. But I came home, so I'm driving, but I had a good 45-minute drive to get back home to the house because of traffic. And I had a session. So on my GPS, I noticed, you have 5 minutes. Once you get back, you have 5 minutes. So in my mind, that 5 minutes was going to be go to the bathroom, grab a water, and open my laptop and go to Zoom. So I called Glenn to tell him about my doctor's appointment. And as soon as he said hi, I kind of figured he was out walking, getting in his 5 miles. And he was at the Greenway. But he very quickly went into, hey, I got everything set up for you, and all you have to do is push start. So my mind goes from, I want to tell you about the doctor's appointment, that's why I'm calling you, to, oh, you're walking. So then my mind, I go visual. Oh, I know where he is. He's on the Greenway. He's walking. The river's, what he's walking beside. And then he says something about a start button. And I'm like, I can't visualize the start button. So I'm thinking, okay, I know what he's talking about. I know exactly where that laptop of his, like I can visualize it. but I can't visualize where on his computer there's a start button. And so my mind very quickly goes to, like, you turn the whole thing off and I have to reboot, like restart your computer. Like, that's the start button, or what's start button? I don't understand the start button thing. And Glenn, again, I hope you hear, it's all logistical at this point, no emotion, just logistical. And Glenn says, yes, you do know where the start button is, babe. You've done this 100 times. Like, you know where the start button is. But I couldn't visualize it. And I mean, literally, like, I'm doing this in my brain going, I can see the chair. I can see the little thing that he puts his laptop on to give it some height. Like, I can visualize that, but I cannot visualize a start button. So I'm just lost in it. And I get really dysregulated when he says, you've done this 100 times. And I knew I was getting dysregulated, but I didn't connect it to what emotion that was. I just said, I can't visualize it. So then he repeats it with a little more detail. But what I'm experiencing is his something, irritation, his aggravation, his disbelief, because he knows I know this. And then finally, when he connected to the word Zoom, that the start button was in the Zoom, then I can visualize, oh, yes, now I know the start button he's talking about. But I just was like, okay, thank you. Let me just hang up the phone because I feel so dysregulated. Well, he goes, whoa, you have to hang up? Like, he knew I was, still whatever it was, a few more minutes to get to the house. And the way I remember it is I basically said, well, no, I guess I don't need to hang up, but you just seem really irritated with me. So, and he goes, well, are you not going to tell me about your doctor's appointment? Again, I'm thinking, okay, now it sounds like he's bothered that I didn't tell him about the doctor's appointment, but I called to tell him about the doctor's appointment. It's just, it got so funky really fast because of this start button that I could not visualize. So I told him about the doctor's appointment, and then, he probably, I don't remember what all he shared with me as far as his walk and where he was on it. By then I'm like pulling up and I'm like, I have to go. Like, I'm here. I've got just 5 minutes and I've got to do these things. So that was the end of that conversation until after I was done with the session and he was back from his walk. And at this point, I do want to finish with where I go with so many of these things. I am not still thinking about that conversation in the car. I'm thinking about, we've been out of town. We just got back. I'm so excited to be home. We got back that morning. So we had flown an early flight in. My suitcase was still packed because I went from the airport to all these appointments, including my doctor's appointment. So now it's like 5:30 p.m. and I'm like, oh, I'm so excited to be home. And it wasn't dark yet. I was thinking, oh, I'm going to run over and hug the grandkids and I'm going to unload my suitcase. And oh my gosh, maybe we can just chill tonight. It's been a great weekend. We've been busy doing a Connection Codes event. Maybe we can just watch a movie. My mind is going there. And then Glenn walks through the door and he's still right there in that car, right there in that moment. And we need to talk about that moment. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, wow. That's, again, the double whammy pain for me. Because I'm like, okay, set everything else aside because we're going to now go back over what happened. And that generally is not a quick conversation. So that kind of plays through that whole thing for me. We can talk about what we ended up talking about, but I think I'd love to hear your version of the story before we get to the end of where we realized the misses were.
It's all the same for me. I mean, I think the first miss was actually logistical because I said, I have everything set up for you. Well, that's what we call hanging antecedent. You don't know what everything is. So you don't know that I've set up the laptop. So that's all set up. And I've pulled up the Zoom, but you don't know that. I just said, I have everything set up for you. Well, that could be a chair and a closed laptop. So, it's unfair to you because you don't know that what that means is the Zoom meeting is set up. And so that leads you into, the start button on Zoom. Well, you didn't know that. I totally missed that you didn't know that. And of course, you totally missed that what I was even referring to about everything, because everything is a hanging antecedent. So that's what set it up, so that we then missed on everything else. That just dawned on me.
Oh, cool. I'm thinking if this is your first time hearing a podcast, hopefully it will get you curious.
You're like, that was the dumbest thing.
Hopefully it'll get you curious about all the things in our story in general. We've been together a really long time and have quite the history of pain, because some of the things you communicated to me were that I think it was you felt hurt that I didn't call you to tell you about the doctor's appointment.
Right after.
Yeah, like after when we're breaking everything down later. And it was like, oh, but I did. That is why I called you.
Yeah.
It's just that whole start button completely got us off. I felt so dysregulated that I didn't even think about the doctor's appointment.
Right.
Like I was nowhere in my mind anymore. And then part of what you also shared later in the night when we were breaking it all down is that I run things through the filter of you're my enemy. And I was very proud of myself because I'm like, you are, well, I called it judging. Like you're judging me in that moment. And I need you to stop judging me in that moment.
Right.
And because you're the judge who says, Phyllis, you're running it through the enemy filter. And I'm like, that's a judgment on me. And I don't accept that. I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to take that judgment. I don't know how to word that, but it's like, I just couldn't figure out the blankety blank start button. Like it was that simple. I think if you had, and we teach this, if you had slowed down with me, and I think you were having a hard time slowing down because you told me later that you had fear you were going to lose connection because of where you were walking.
Like phone connection.
Phone connection, right. You were going to lose the phone connection and I would not be able to get on my session.
Yep.
Well, but again, it was an emotion you didn't tell me.
Right.
So I didn't know that your irritation that I was experiencing was fear that we're going to get the phone, we would have no service, and then I would get there and not know how to get on my session.
I want to highlight that for a second, because that is the truth for so many of our conflicts of we're experiencing a fear or a pain or hurt about something totally unrelated to our partner. But we've been in relationships for so long where it is easy to be like, oh, they're irritated. It's because of me. We do that all the time.
Would you be willing to say that happens all the time?
Yes.
We do. Because
I know you.
I'm not trying to be nitpicky, but I just want our audience to know you're not doing this on purpose. This isn't an active thing. Nobody's that dumb. And I'm expanding a little bit, but I hear people all the time say, oh, that's just a lie I tell myself. Nobody tells themselves a lie. You're not even capable of telling yourself a lie because that wouldn't be possible because you know it was a lie and then you just laugh about it. So I just really try to externalize it for people so that they're not, like, well, this is what I do to myself.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I get what you're saying, but this is what happens. So.
Well, that happens all the time. Where our partner comes in, they're grumpy. We're like, well, they're mad at me because dinner's not done yet, or because I didn't have sex with them last night, or what, fill in the blank, when they could be upset about something. This was mine and Wes's story for years. Right. We had so many conflicts over this. And I would be like, it has nothing to do with you. Yeah. And so I'm glad that you're highlighting that part of it. Yeah.
Well, it's so, I don't know if you call it oxymoronish or what, but I'm trying to go fast because I'm feeling fear that I'm going to end up in the spot of the greenway where there's no phone reception. So I'm trying to real quickly tell her. And so, I said, I've set everything up. Well, I know what that means, but she doesn't know what that means. She doesn't know what the antecedent is. So anyway, we're immediately talking about two different things. I'm talking about the Zoom. She's thinking I'm talking about the computer.
And part of what later in that night we talked about, just like when he said, you've done this 100 times, I got hit with shame. And in my body, I felt dysregulated, like just flustered is another word I think of. I just felt so flustered. It didn't occur to me that it's shame. So I didn't say, oh, I am feeling shame. Those are the moments where, if possible, it's so great when the partner in that interaction slows down and goes, oh, what's happening for you right now? And I think if that had happened, the slowdown, I would have said, I feel a lot of shame when you say in that moment, you've done this 100 times. That did not help me visualize that start button. Yeah. Because it sped it up even more. Like you telling me I've done it 100 times doesn't go, oh, there's the start button. Like it made the screen even darker for me. Like I could not visualize what he was talking about.
Yeah.
That whole interaction might have been a minute, but I felt so much pain in it that then I just wanted to hang up the phone, even though I still could have talked for a few more minutes. And of course, then me wanting and saying goodbye, and Glenn's like, whoa, wait a minute. Where are you going? Like, you don't have to hang up, or we don't have to hang up. And then I'm like, oh, okay. Well, and then we didn't even really, in that moment, I think I said I felt hurt that you said, you've done that 100 times. So I didn't even quite get to the shame in that moment. I just said I felt hurt. And he said, well, but it's true. You've done that 100 times.
Well, and my whole point in saying you've done this 100 times was to help you get back to the fact that you know this, you just forgotten. But I mean, if I'm hearing it right now, it's not that you actually had forgotten. You didn't know what everything was.
Right.
You didn't know what I meant by everything. You thought I'm talking about the laptop. I'm talking about the Zoom screen or whatever it's called.
Yeah. And then, we only had a couple of minutes before I actually pulled up in the driveway, and then I did have to get off. And so then it all came back after we were back together later that night into a conversation. I was aware probably, and this is now I'm judging what your walk was like, but I'm thinking you had a lot of time to think about what just happened, where I went into a Zoom session with a client and I was focused on the client. Right. And then when I got off, it had been long enough that then I got flooded with joy. It wasn't dark yet, even though it was after 5, and I was thinking about the grandkids. And so my mind went to, oh man, let me get outside, breathe some fresh air. Let me run over and hug the grandbabies because we all live on the property together. But I get it that when Glenn walked in, he was still like, we need to dissect, like, what in the world happened? Which we sat down and talked about it, but we were still getting stuck because of that statement of you're running it through the enemy filter, that I'm your enemy. And if you would just run it through the filter that I'm for you, this wouldn't happen. And I'm like, I'm pretty proud of myself that I can tell you that I was hit with shame and that I was hurt. Yeah. And that for me is huge. And I also just said to him, you're putting a judgment on it. And I need you to stop, because I'm just listening to that too many times where, oh, this is running through the enemy filter. It's like, no, it was just simply an emotion that I felt in that moment. And it doesn't have to have a judgment on it to blow it into something really big.
Right.
Yeah.
To me, it was a really simple, and it's interesting that you are now saying that you realize that the way you worded it, most people wouldn't have known what you were talking about. Like, oh, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if you said the
everything.
The everything.
Yeah. And
right?
I don't know if most people, I mean, I have no idea. We could.
Well, that doesn't even matter. I didn't know what you meant by everything. So,
because it doesn't matter if 99% of people would have known.
Right. I did not know what you meant by everything.
You're valid.
And you were so confident in the sentence that I didn't even question, well, what do you mean by everything? Like,
it made sense to me. And
I didn't know where we were getting off in that moment.
Yeah. I have fear in this, but Glenn, can I conjecture your experience a little bit?
Sure.
Because from me, because I hear how you describe your relationship of Phyllis is the productive one. She gets things done, and you've been asking for partnership more. And Glenn, you tend to not see those types of things. Phyllis, you're the Wes in our relationship. I am the Glenn in our relationship. Wes sees everything that needs to get done, and I miss. And so for me, I think about Glenn in that moment, like, I got everything done. Yeah. And so using that word, everybody's like, I took care of all of it for you. Right. Like, and so it was a joy, I'm conjecturing, a joy experience for Glenn.
We actually talked about
to use the word everything. I got the chair, I got the Zoom put, like, I did it all. Yeah. And so I can see how that word everything was from a joy place, and how even in that joy, we can miss each other with how we describe it. Yeah.
Well, and Glenn actually did say later that one of the things he was hurt about was that I didn't say, babe, you did it for me. That I didn't even highlight or even mention that he set it up for me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, which later when we got it all said, I said, thank you for getting it all set up for me. But it wasn't a joy experience for me because of the pain of me saying, I don't know what start button you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so it turned into a shame experience for me
Wow.
So the fact that he did it, there was almost
So hard.
It's one of those where it's like, I think emotionally it'd been better if I could have just run in and grabbed my laptop and opened it and done what I normally do. So you setting it up for me out of partnership, out of wanting to be helpful, out of wanting to be more aware, turned into such a pain experience because he went so fast in telling me, and then he mentioned the start button, and I didn't know, is he talking about his laptop?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, I
I
get
need to
that.
reboot it. I think that it's an interesting breakdown of what can happen so quickly.
Yes.
And that being able to tune into what's happening for yourself in those moments are so huge.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where we find each other again, is being able to say, yeah, I just felt shame when you said you've done this 100 times. That he was confused by that because he's like, I was being helpful, like build your confidence. Babe, you've got
Validation.
this.
Yeah.
You've done this 100 times, where I felt shame in that wording. Like, and I think sometimes in our dynamic, what's hard is Glenn doesn't want to ever hurt me. He doesn't want me to ever feel sad, feel shame. And so he feels it like in this huge magnitude, almost like, okay, we need to talk about this so this can't happen again. So next time, what do you need from me? Like it's this intense, or that way I experience it.
Yeah, I'm not an intense person.
No,
But I
you're
get
not.
that that's what
You're not intense. No one thinks that.
all of our audience, a lot of these people know me. They know that I am
He's not. He's really laid back, really laid back.
But it is funny even that you say that, because that's how I experience myself. Like I don't feel intensity all day long, but I know, after we've lived together for a long time, I know that is actually how other people experience me.
Yeah. That's interesting. Now you're going into another topic, because I do experience your intensity at times. It is a pain experience for me. But then when I say it, which I am committed to doing, for Glenn, it's like, okay, then tell me how to do it so I can never do that again, because I don't want to ever cause you pain. And I'm like going, I wasn't voting for that or choosing that moment to feel shame. I just did.
Yeah.
And I just want to say it and get it out of my body, and we're good. I don't need to analyze it, what I say, to death, so that next time you'll know, first of all, no two things ever duplicate themselves, like no two situations. And then it's like, I could get hit with shame again if you ever said that, but I might not get hit with shame again. If you said, hey, babe, you've done this 100 times, I might in that moment go, oh, yeah, thanks, babe. You're right. I know how to do this. But in that particular day, I did not. I felt shame over it.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really important that I stay true to that. I stay true to showing up and going, well, I didn't choose shame. I just felt shame this particular time when you said you've done this 100 times.
Yeah.
And for me, this is such a classic. I think about Module 8 of the Foundations course. If you haven't done the Foundations course, do it. I'm telling you, it's change your life. The cycle is that Phyllis is not the bad, the wrong, the evil in this situation, but neither is Glenn. Glenn's not trying to be bad, wrong, or evil. It's the cycle between us that's sped up with the unprocessed emotion that turns into a cyclone. And the cyclone is the bad, the wrong, the evil. The cyclone is the enemy. And when we remember to partner together against the cyclone, we win. When we realize, okay, and again, going all the way back to the beginning, I don't know if we microanalyzed enough, if that's what we conclude, but just the word everything, that I mean something by everything different than what you understand about everything. That's not because I'm evil, and it's not because you're evil. We just do. I said everything makes perfect sense to me. I'm the one that said it. You heard everything, and you don't know. You understand. You think you understand what that means, but I meant something different than what you. So we're just missing from the very beginning the actual definition of that one word. And if we slow down better, and of course, then I'm pushed with the fear that, oh my gosh, my phone reception can get bad in any minute, so I have to hurry up. And the faster I go, the worse it gets. It's another Connection Codes protocol. Slower is faster. If we slow that down to the freeze frame level to figure out what's happening, we would not miss, we would connect.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think for listeners, for our community, just to recognize that behind every interaction, there's an emotion firing.
Yep.
And oftentimes it is not even what you think it is for the other person. Phyllis couldn't see the joy that Glenn had in that moment. Glenn couldn't see the shame that Phyllis had in that moment. And there's so much happening underneath the surface. And then we're, say, like talking sideways or filling in the blanks. We fill in the blanks for the other person. And we think, oh, they mean this when they mean that. And so having these tools, being able to actually then come back and be like, oh, I was hit with so much shame and I feel hurt about this part of it. To be able to put those words to it, you were then able to reconnect. I mean, you had to talk through it. It took some time, but it didn't dysregulate you for a week compared to how so many I know of are and what I've been told of your previous interactions have been. And so now you can actually see each other. Now Phyllis can see Glenn's joy. It may not hit for her in the same way that he had hoped it would in his partnership, but she'd be like, oh, that's what was happening for Glenn. And Glenn can see Phyllis in a new way, like, oh, that makes sense now. That's why she responded. Like, oh, yeah, of course. You just left the doctor. You're rushing to a meeting. Like, there's a lot happening for my girl. Like, you can see each other because you have the language to share. And so now we're actually going to do a core.
I have to say one more thing.
Okay,
It's our most complex connection codes protocol, which I bet you couldn't even quote. But the one, I know that you believe you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure that you realize that what you heard is not what I meant.
Okay, you're going to have to say that again.
And
you're
slowly.
And slowly and into the mic.
And you think about what happened there. That's exactly what happened. I know that you believe you understand what you think I said, the whole everything, just that one word, but I'm not sure that you realize that what you heard is not what I meant. And that's what happened. Again, it's not because I'm evil. It's not because she's evil. What I said just didn't communicate. And communication is both sides of it. And I used the word everything, which meant something very different to her than what it meant to me. And it's just amazing that one word can knock us off course. And again, that's the reason we say slower is faster. Slow down, slow down, slow down. Find out what happened. And then we don't have those misses. But I would love to do an issue-specific wheel about that.
Sure.
Can we do that?
Sure.
Okay.
And in that, as we go into the wheel, one of the thoughts that I have is on an episode recently, you said that when you live in close proximity with someone, you're going to bump toes. You know, you're going to knock into each other.
Bump toes. That's
you did. You said step on each other's toes. You're going to bump into each other or step on each other's toes.
Well,
yes.
I can't even picture bumping toes. Here, babe, let me bump toes with you.
Like, you're going to step on each other's toes or bump into each other is what you said.
Right.
And that's what happened. You bumped into each other. And that moment no longer defines anything. It doesn't say anything about the other person. Where for so long, when we were missing, it's like, oh, well, now our relationship is doomed. We're done. And when Wes and I miss with each other now, it's like, yeah, that really stunk. That date we did a few weeks ago in early January, that really stunk. It doesn't define our relationship. It doesn't say anything about who Wes is. We can just be like, yeah, we can see each other. And that changes everything.
Yeah, and our misses still feel painful, but I do think about what we did 25 years ago. I mean, that, who knows, that would have been a week, 3 weeks of just total disconnection, loss from each other. And of course, I always say that our disconnects overlap. So by the time we got that one sorted out, if we ever did, there'd been 2 more. So it just overlapped, lasted the whole year. Yeah.
So can you do an issue-specific wheel about this miss? And the wheel is the tool that Dr. Glenn and Phyllis created that actually helps you know how to communicate what's happening in your body. So in that moment, once Phyllis got to the other side, she could be like, oop, that was shame, that was hurt, this is what was happening. Glenn could process what was happening for him, and now they can connect.
Yeah, it is amazing, too, that, and we haven't done the wheel yet, but I imagine there were at least 7 and probably all 8 emotions happening just in that one little bitty. It's just amazing how complex we humans are and how many emotions. I used to say, I remember early on, you may not remember me saying that. I'm sorry, I keep getting sidetracked. But my theory is that every human experiences all 8 core emotions every day. That's ridiculous. Every human experiences all 8 core emotions probably every 20 minutes. I mean, it's just amazing. And we can experience all 8 core emotions about one thing, one event, all at the same time. And of course, brain scanning now reveals that the brain region just lights up. So can I go first? So for me, there was a ton of joy just in setting it up. I was your hero. I was making sure, because I knew you were going to be cutting it close. And so I just wanted it to be a real smooth. I just pictured you sliding into the chair and, just as the camera comes up. So there's a lot of joy just in getting that all prepped for you so that you wouldn't have to feel the stress of it, which is ironic because it worked out the opposite. Fear that I was going to get to a dead zone on the Greenway and you wouldn't be able to hear me. So I was trying to rush to tell you real quickly so that you would know where it was and what needed to be done. I guess a little sad when you didn't know what I was talking about because it was very obvious to me and I didn't understand what was happening for you because we've done this so many times. We're Zoomaholics.
Well.
So pain and then fear, it's like, oh crap, I'm not going to be able to convey to her clearly what needs to be done. I don't know how to explain the start button over the phone. Lonely, I guess a little bit. Yeah, not partnered with you in it. Hurt. I eventually felt hurt. Well, and then I felt hurt, when I thought you were going to hang up and not tell me about your doctor's visit. Guilt afterwards. I'm like, dang, how did we possibly miss on that? The whole thing was set up to bless you, to benefit you. To be a good thing for you, and now it ended up being a detrimental thing for you. Shame, I guess there's always shame when we don't connection code either perfectly or even well. Because I'm like, well, dang, this is what we teach. We travel all over the place telling people this. We should at least do it perfectly, or 99% of the time, because this is what we're presenting to the world. We actually wrote a book about it. If you haven't read the book, get the book. So I think I get hit with shame. It's like, well, good grief. It's so fundamental, so basic, so simple, and we missed on it. Is that close?
I don't know.
Is
that close? Okay. Yeah. I think right away felt hurt because you sped up and you didn't slow down.
Right.
Felt shame when you said, you've done this 100 times.
Yeah.
Felt probably lonely in that moment. Because I could tell I was getting dysregulated and I felt unpartnered, which is probably why I wanted to get off the phone. Later, felt a lot of anger when you said it's because you run it through the filter that I'm the enemy. And I'm thinking it's not that complicated. So just felt anger and being judged and felt labeled in that. Felt guilt that I didn't in the moment say right off the bat, like, ooh. Feeling fear because you're going really fast, feeling hurt by the fact that you're going fast. And then, of course, shame was right after that. So I just didn't say that. So I feel guilt about that. Already said my shame. Already said my anger. Let's see. Fear that I couldn't figure out what the start button was. Like there was this instant fear of, oh my word, what is he talking about? And, I feel more comfortable working on my own laptop than yours in general.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So I always have all the tabs open, so I immediately can get to where I need to be. Yours is a little different. And then I think there probably in the moment was no joy. Even in the fact that you did all that for me, there wasn't the joy. Yeah. So I would say I would have to back off and look at the overall. No, I felt joy afterwards when we talked about it later that I stuck to sharing at the core what was happening with me and I didn't back down from that.
Wow.
So felt joy in that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. And thank you both for being willing to share so vulnerably because this happens every day, all over the place, multiple times a day, not only with your spouse, but with your coworker and your mom and your children. And
and I just want to say something about that because I hear from people all the time, it's like, are you kidding me? We can't do that. We don't have time to do that. You don't have time not to do that because if we don't process through that, and I get it, okay, fine, it takes you 3 minutes, 5 minutes. But if we had done that at the beginning, it would have saved so much time. And a dysregulated Glenn, a dysregulated Tira is a lesser version of us. So take the time. And that's what we do with our babies. We don't say to them, hey, we don't have time to deal with this. And I get it, especially parents, especially moms of young ones, is like, oh my gosh, I just wanted to go to the store and pick up some milk.
Yeah.
And shoot, that took a lot longer. But you have to do it because otherwise the kid's out of their mind for the next hour and a half. And if you slow down, and it's not magic fairy dust, but if you slow down, they actually get re-regulated, I guess you'd call it. It actually is better in the long run to slow down.
Yeah, and I do want to commend y'all because you may not do it 100% of the time, but you're pretty dang close.
Yeah.
Well, and so I do want to speak into that for our listeners and even for me witnessing your relationship. Like, yeah, of course you miss because you live in very close proximity and you've had a really intense year, a really intense year.
Yeah. And we bump toes.
You do bump toes. You bump toes all the time. But at the same time, you do it. You just don't even recognize how often you are getting it right because it is the lifestyle at this point. It's easy for us to see our misses. You know, it's easy for me to see the miss I had with Wes in early January because we live it. It stands out deeper.
Yeah. And I do just want to say to our listeners, we're just pilgrims on the journey. Tyra and Wes are, Phyllis and Glenn are. Do we use the tools a little bit better than some? I would assume so, because we've been using these tools for a while.
Yeah.
We've been practicing. You know, a sculptor uses the sculpting tools better than somebody that just is in their first class, their first day of sculpting. But you just keep practicing, and then you become an artist, and you get really good at it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And so we want to encourage you that when you're feeling these moments of tension, this next time that it happens, because you both felt it, there was like, ooh, there's something happening here. Instead of speeding up, to slow down, to get curious, and then get to that core to be able to say, oop, having some fear that I'm missing something here, that can change everything. If you've not already downloaded the Core Emotion Wheel, download it today. It is in the show notes. And that is the tool that actually helps you access those emotions. And maybe you're like, okay, we're actually ready to do this thing. Like we want to live connected regularly. Glenn, you mentioned the Foundations course multiple times on this podcast. We hear from people and they're like, I listen to the podcast, I have the wheel, and that's great. Oh, you've scratched the surface of what is in that course for how deep you can go in seeing each other, giving identity, connecting, letting the river of emotion flow, as you say, and really being able to understand that 1 pound versus 500 pound weight. There's so much in the course that actually guides you to where this is now a lifestyle and not a in the moment Band-Aid, like just going through it. This can become your lifestyle. And so there'll also be a link in the show notes for the Foundations course. I encourage you to do it today.
And I do have to say, when we travel, we hear so many people who are there with their friends who turn them on to the connection codes and change their life forever. And they are now connecting with us, but it was really their friends that said, hey, you got to check this out, invest in your life, invest in yourself, invest in your marriage, your family, your business, whatever. And again, we encourage our listeners, just share it with people. It's just I would suggest one of the best investments you'll ever make in your life.
Yeah. I will forever be grateful for the friend who showed it to me. Yeah.
And you were slightly annoyed and uninterested.
I was uninterested. Yeah, I was. I will admit that. And look where I am now. And so, yes, share it with your friends because it absolutely is like life-changing. And so thank you for being here every week. Thank both of you for sharing. And we do all of this because
you need this.
You deserve this. So let's do this.
Let's do this.